What an interesting, intelligent and touching discussion. Thanks very much, Elia, and thanks very much to all the panelists. I could have listened to you much, much longer, but there is still a tough schedule we have to go through. For me, Jenny, when I listened to the Holocaust survivor, Naftali First, speaking in German language, but he said at the beginning he never wanted to speak German again. Me as a German, I nearly cried. I think it's so emotional, and it shows also what's positive in what could be positive in history. But before we go to the next panel, I would like to ask you, Jenny, you're also the generation of survivors. What did you feel when you watched this panel?
Well, yes, you're right. I'm the fourth generation, the next generation, and you know, I still feel the Holocaust trauma because I grew up with the stories from my great-grandmother telling the story of her and her family during the Holocaust. And I experienced that. But my kids, for example, are already the fifth generation.
You have three kids.
Yes, and they will be, they will probably not experience the Holocaust survivors like Naftali, because when, you know, when they will be old enough to understand what Holocaust is, probably we won't have any survivors anymore. And also, it really hurts me that we see nowadays people on the street of Berlin that are relativizing the Holocaust. They're in protest against Corona restrictions. They're wearing the yellow star, you know, victimizing themselves, and they're spreading conspiracy theories. And it's very worrying for me. And also, of course, the growth of of anti-Semitism and extremism in Europe in general.
Your husband, Elia, who was the moderator of the last panel, he said he never went to go to Auschwitz. Do you have some discussions with him about this? Would you go?
I even, like, also for me, I think it would be too hard to go.
And when your children want to go? Because they should go, because every school...
I agree. I think that for some people that still are somehow connected emotionally with the generation that survived Holocaust, it's still too painful. I hope they will be able to go.
Okay.
And we also remember what happened last year on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is close at the end of September. Last year we had the terror attack on the synagogue in Halle. The next day, I'm not a depressive person, but the next day I had really problems to go out of the bed. Everything felt so dark for me and so, you know, so senseless. I had to force myself to stand up. And I couldn't think that this can happen again in Germany, but it happened.
It's shocking.
It's shocking. And that's why it's very important that we stay in the discussion here, because it's not an alternative to stay in bed, it's the opposite. We have to fight against it. Searching alliances against anti-Semitism and hate speech. This is the topic of our next panel. We also want to focus a little bit now on the new media, on the social media, so-called social media. And I'm very happy that this panel is moderated by Markus Spillmann, Swiss journalist, entrepreneur and media advisor, and the former head of journalism and the former editor-in-chief of the Neue Zürcher Zeitung. Please, Markus, the panel is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susanne. Warm welcome to everybody joining us this very evening in this live debate about anti-Semitism and hate speech in the digital era. Tonight we want to discuss a phenomenon that had always accompanied us in analog life, but is now becoming more and more part of the digital media cosmos, the devaluation, the denigration, the open racism, not only, but also of Judaism, as well as the almost endemic disinhibition of language, style, and form, especially on social media. Let me formulate the following thesis. The problem is not new, however, it is getting bigger because it's easier than ever to promote, distribute, and share anti-Semitism, racism, and hate in anonymity and globally. And therefore, the numbers of violators and those of potential victims are getting bigger and bigger. So what should and what can be done in an enlightened, civilized environment to prevent both hate speech and anti-Semitism, or to ensure that the phenomena mentioned, dissemination, anonymity, and perpetration, can at least be limited? What role do we play as media consumers and as media producers? And by producers, I mean not just journalists and media entrepreneurs, but all of us, because anyone who uses social media today is at the same time a liker and a sharer. And thus we all may influence our communities both directly and indirectly. And how and where do we draw the line between freedom of opinion and censorship, between political correctness and permissible criticism? How do we deal with different opinions, but also with the fact that we live in an age in which historical memory is fading and the distinction between true and false, between opinion and facts is becoming increasingly faded, even intentionally blurred? These are some of the questions I'd like to discuss with my guests this evening, whom I'm warmly welcome. Connected from Switzerland, Roger Schawinski, one of the most prominent journalists here in Switzerland, a media pioneer and successful media entrepreneur, but also an author and a multi-interested intellectual. Ksenia Svetlova, also formed as a journalist, was born in Russia and now works as a senior research fellow at the Institute for Policy and Strategy at IDC Herzliya and Midwin Institute in Herzliya. Nikodemus Schnabel, monk of the Benedictine order at Dormition Abbey in Jerusalem. Father Nikodemus is also director of the Jerusalem Institute of the Goethe Society, one of the oldest Catholic scientific societies in Germany, which is dedicated to fostering and promoting the interdisciplinary exchange of science. Rabbi Dov Lipman, a former Knesset deputy of the party Yesh Atid, which mainly supports the secular Israeli middle class. The party has been part of one of the former coalition governments under PM Netanyahu, but this is Israel, switched sides and is now part of an independent opposition force. Rabbi Lipman was born in the US and has emigrated to Israel a couple of years ago. He is a columnist and well-known commentator. And last but not least, Alana Baranov, who, if I'm correctly informed, is attending from Durban in South Africa, where she works for the World Jewish Congress and runs the Adult Education and Social Justice portfolio at the Durban Holocaust Center. Unfortunately, Zavzan Jebli, representative of the state of Berlin to the federal government and state secretary for civic engagement and international representation, had to apologize at short notice. So enough of introduction. Let's start with the analysis of the problem and maybe also how it has evolved. And because she has to leave this panel earlier, I'd like to address my first question to you, Ksenia. I mentioned the fact that more and more grown-ups known about the Holocaust just from the books nowadays. So how has that an impact on their attitude in respect of anti-Semitism, also in respect of hate speech if they use social media?
Well, thank you so very much. It's good to be here with you, with friends, with people with whom we share common values. And even despite the very difficult situation now with Corona in Israel and in some other countries, it's still good to have the opportunity to get together to discuss these very important issues for all of us. First of all, I apologize for having to leave earlier due to some unplanned circumstances. As for your question, well, I think that this is the course of life. Yes. So of course, unfortunately, those who experienced themselves the horrors of the Holocaust are leaving us. And first of all, what we can do right now in order to maintain the memory is, first of all, to dedicate time to them and to gather their memories in a way that will be also available to the younger generation. Because I hear more and more from young Israelis who study Holocaust through their whole life in the school, from very little age. My twin daughters, who are now 11, the first time they heard of Holocaust was when they're 4. But their knowledge about what actually happened during the Holocaust was very, very limited until, I took them to my mother, to their grandmother. She has also very little memory because she was born in 1941. But still, her grandfather perished in the Holocaust, and most of the family. So telling this very human story about the absurdity of this evil force, I think it did the absolute change, for them, because they heard it from, well, not perhaps the first source, but still they heard a human story about human beings and not only reading it through the books. So I think that what we experienced, this social experiment, I would say, the story of Eva on the Instagram, and the attempt, maybe it was not the most refined one, but it was a genuine attempt to interest the younger generation in this the most important story of our people. And I would like to see more and more of these stories using the new formats, using the social media, because this is how young people, and also not so young people, are talking this day. This is how all of us consume information. So I assume that there will be more of such projects soon.
May I interrupt you, Ksenia, on that at this very moment, and we will come back to this very topic, of course, during the debate. But to clarify, do you think that not having first-hand experience in a physical manner, because these people will fade away one day, of course, the survivors, the survivors of the Holocaust, do you see that to tape them and to deliver these memories, these personal memories in a digital area, in a different form, that this will have the same or a similar impact on the younger generation as a personal contact with a survivor?
I have to tell you that it might not be a very popular opinion, yes, but I think that it might have, in some cases, even more influence.
Okay.
Because, I follow, and I also followed this story when being a Knesset member. And I heard complaints from teachers when they say, well, we bring to them, a person who survived the Holocaust with these blue numbers on his hand. And it's very difficult to keep the concentration of the students more than 5 to 10 minutes, because this is the ability of probably to consume, the information. And they sit with him for an hour. It's difficult for this, old person, of course, all of them are very, very old. We have to respect it, of course. It's difficult for them to concentrate. And, if we want to really, seize the opportunity of the social media and to also turn it into educational tool, I believe that we have to do our utmost right now to be very, very innovative, because we cannot afford to lose this moment when we still have around us people who lived through this evil and can tell their story. The newer formats, that they are more perhaps adapted to the younger people's style of life. They are not bad. They are different. Okay? For us, because I heard the story about Holocaust when I was about 6. From my own grandmother who survived the Holocaust. Okay, but we all know, that today most of the students in Israel already do not meet a Holocaust survivor. Some of them go to, but this is much later. So they might encounter the story, in different formats in their everyday life when it's handled to them through the channels that they are tuning into. So I do not know, because I'm not an expert in this field, how, what kind of effect will it have in comparison to us, those who actually knew the survivors. But I do know that we have to be prepared. It's not something that, it's fell on us as a surprise. Yes, older people, unfortunately, they die and they leave us. They might go when they leave. Memory that is documented, well documented, taped, and there are very strong words being echoed time and again through various media.
Okay, thank you very much, Ksenia. So we heard now a lot already about let's say, the positive effects of social media, or how social media or new digital medium could be used to promote and to keep alive the memory and to fight or to cope with anti-Semitism. But let's look at the other side of the coin. Alana, do you see specific forms of anti-Semitism or hate speech? We will also talk a little bit more about hate speech in general afterwards, but do you see specific forms on social media? And if so, what are really the difference to other forms of xenophobia or racism coming from an analog world?
Well, Markus, thank you so much for having me on the panel this evening. It is a privilege to be here with you all and to be talking about such an important topic, one that's really close to my heart. And yes, I think that the beauty of social media is that it allows for so many different voices from around the world to be heard. But the other side of that is that it can be quite a dangerous weapon of disinformation, and it can be used to manipulate. Something that we have seen over recent years is a rise in both anti-Semitism and xenophobia, as well as other forms of hate speech on social media platforms. And what's been interesting, at least in South Africa, is the use of medieval blood libel type classic anti-Semitic tropes, which has surprised some people because it is such a new medium and technology. But a lot of the content that we deal with on a daily basis here is looking at Jews as controlling the world, blood libel, classic tropes. And the same with the xenophobic content that we see here in South Africa. It really taps into the structural inequalities and the racism that has become embedded in our society and hasn't been adequately dealt with since the fall of apartheid. So it's harkening back to the past, but we're also seeing a relevance with the content, tapping into the current challenges and insecurities that societies are facing, whether it be global warming, economic recessions, and now COVID-19 and the coronavirus. Just as there's been this pandemic around the world, we've seen a rise in hate speech, and the anti-Semitism and xenophobia has taken that insecurity and added a flavor to it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alana. You mentioned that the problem is growing, or I mean, we have some studies also already about the phenomena. Roger, you sitting here also in Switzerland and midst in Europe, and maybe you could also give us a little bit more about your experience and your feelings about the development in Europe, especially, of course, in Germany, in France, in Italy. Do you also see kind of worsening development concerning the topic we are talking about?
Definitely. I mean, conspiracy theories have been around for hundreds of years, but only since the start of the internet, conspiracy theories have grown tremendously, and these people are not open to arguments. I've written a book about that. Just on the contrary, if you give them arguments why they're wrong, then they feel even stronger about their conspiracy theories. And of course, in the conspiracy theories, historically, the Elders of Zion, I mean, this started basically the conspiracy theories in 200 years ago. anti-Semitism plays a very big role in that. And the problem is, can we have a conversation with these people? And I don't think so. People who are in this world, they are not reachable. I have talked to some of these people and asked them, can we talk about it? They say, yeah, look, once you've seen the light, once you have understood that behind every story, there's another story. Behind every truth that is presented in our media, there is another truth, then you can't get out of it. And that is very dangerous. We see now this phenomenon of QAnon in America, which is coming to Switzerland, which is coming to Germany. And of course, all of these conspiracy theories lead back to anti-Semitism. And that is a very dangerous thing. And I don't know really how we can deal with this phenomenon. And I'm really very pessimistic about how we can stop that.
Mm-hmm. Gives me the chance to introduce also Rabbi Lipman, because you grew up and have been socialized in the States, and I guess you still observe the current affairs very, very closely. Does the endemic use of Twitter by President Trump, has this changed, in your perspective, the political dialogue in the US? And that the fact that there is basically no more consensus about ethical standards because they are constantly violated by the president itself as a function.
Well, as an Israeli politician, and thank you again for having me, I'm going to remove myself from specific elements of American politics. But there's no doubt that in all of my work, especially now with an organization called HonestReporting, where we're constantly monitoring what's happening, there's no doubt that there has to be real initiatives to crack down on the companies that own the social media venues to clearly see anti-Semitism as hate speech. We see so many examples where, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, where on the one hand, they'll crack down on certain forms of hate speech, but not on things that are anti-Semitic. And we're working very hard on that process to make sure that there are clear guidelines, exactly what is anti-Semitism, what is not to be tolerated. And we work very hard throughout the day to monitor to make sure that anti-Semitic things are taken down. Just as an example, in July, Louis Farrakhan gave this horrific anti-Semitic speech, and it was on YouTube, and there's no reason for it allowed to be on there. And we were part of a process to get that removed. We have to be constantly vigilant about that. I agree with Roger. You're not going to be able to change people who believe in this classic anti-Semitism to change, but we can be active to make sure that it's removed from the public platform, to make sure that it's not spread to those who are not part of that camp at the current time. And that's where we really have to focus our efforts. We at HonestReporting work very hard on that, but that's where collectively, I believe, all groups in the world who are against hate, against any kind of racism, against any kind of discrimination can join that battle to make sure that anti-Semitism is included in that category.
Thank you. But Father Nikodemus, as a Catholic monk living in Jerusalem within a very mixed religious environment, and so to say, not the one of the most peaceful ones, I wonder, do you see kind of cultural or social differences between societies in respect how to deal with the phenomena? Rabbi Lipman just mentioned that there have been efforts to crack down this kind of anti-Semitism on these specific platforms. But of course, we have to find a kind of common ground. What is the problem really? And I guess different societies have a different view on that. What is your experience as a, let's say, a person living in different cultures and different societies?
Yes, but I think, thank you that I'm here on that panel. I'm very proud of that. I'm very thankful. I think there's one common in all societies is the problem of make it short. If you see Twitter, 280 letters you have, characters you have, also others, the algorithm of Instagram, of YouTube, it's pushing you, shorter is better. And I think the big problemacy I face. It's that our world, it's wonderful complex. And I think as a religious leader, we have to teach to give joy of that taste of complexity, that there are no easy answers. For example, my founder of my order, Benedict of Nursia, he described us as God seekers. So we are on the way. So we are every day on the way to get deeper in that mystery and that complexity. And I think that's exactly the opposite of what conspiracy theories offer. They say, okay, this complex world, it's too complex. There must be an easy answer. And the easy answer, it's clear, it's this or this group. The best answer, of course, best in a cynic way, are the Jews, because they're a group often people are not facing in daily life. So you can create a monster better if you have no contra experience in your daily life. For example, if I would say all medicines are guilty, then you say, but my doctor, he is totally reasonable and I can't. But if you say the Jews, I think a great majority of people, especially who are anti-Semitic and are follower of that conspiracy theory, have never met a Jew in real life. So they believe, okay, these are the monsters behind that all. Now it's clear why I'm in such situation, why the world is so. And that's the point. I think we have, and that's, I see the task for all religious leaders, to teach the beauty of complexity and to be very critical and be very attention cautious about easy answers. So if one offer you to explain you the whole world in 90 seconds, be careful.
I like the beauty of complexity, this notion. I mean, that sounds very, very seductive, but to challenge it a little bit from the perspective of the political realities. I mean, complexity is not the concept to win for politicians and not the concept to win majorities, even in mature, in ripe democracies like Switzerland, for example. I mean, the whole concept of the political discussion, debate is reduce complexity. So how to deal with this, let's say, contradictory sides? On one side, yes, we have to be differentiate, we have to explain the problem, we have to be very careful also in the use of our words. And on the other side, the beauty in brackets that a politician likes to provoke, to reduce this kind of complexity, because he or she knows with that concept, I'm on the winning side, I'm not on the losing side. So what's the answer on that? Roger, you have been very pessimistic about that, but I mean, what is it? Is that the end of democracy then?
It's really, if we are in difficult times, and we are in difficult times, these things happen more often, and if it comes from the top, and we have seen it in Hungary, we have seen it in Poland, we have seen it in the United States, where he said there are fine people on both sides, and he talks about neo-Nazis. So they use that whenever it's a problem, you can refer that maybe the Jews are behind that. And so I'm really pessimistic, and we've seen it after 2015, after what happened in Europe, what happened in Germany. There was more anti-Semitism in Germany. Of course, at the AfD, the party of the extreme right, had a renewal. They came up to 15% or more of the electorate. Now they went down a little bit to 10%. But in difficult times, and we are in difficult times, we are not out of that. We don't know how long this is going to last, whether the world will somehow sometimes be like the way we have experienced the world in the last 70 years. maybe then the search for scapegoats, and then you go after the usual suspects, as we have known in history. So we have to really be careful. Yes, I am kind of pessimistic.
Let's come back to the day one of this conference is labeled as the Media Holocaust and Generation Z, time for new approaches. So it's a clearly addressed, let's say, responsibility with Generation Z, the fourth generation who lives now and has been socialized, totally socialized already by social media, by digital media, by smartphones. So, to concentrate a little bit on this generation, do we need another form of a new culture of memory, a new way how to promote to younger the necessity to be different, to differentiate, to be careful in respect of anti-Semitism or other form of hate speech, of racism. What's your experience, Alana, in Durban and in your field of profession?
Absolutely. I think now more than ever, we need a new culture of memory, and we need more memory. We need to really be targeting the youth to understand and engage with the past, and to take those lessons from history and use them as a lens with which to view current issues and challenges in society. And through that process of learning and understanding, the awareness needs to translate into concrete action, because it's no good to learn historical facts and hear testimony and to keep it on a bookshelf. It needs to translate into making young people upstanders, empowering them to make a difference, whether it's in their own families or communities, and then taking it out from there into a public sphere. At the South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation, we are lucky to have school groups, business and corporate, NGO and government groups coming through our workshops and engaging with the history. And we really have tried to take, whether it's Nazi Germany and the past from World War II, or our own past here in South Africa, engaging with apartheid and other events that are happening now currently in the world, and using that as tools with which to build a human rights focused future. And I think that culture of memory that deals with how young people can then go forward and be proactive is crucial at this time.
Mm-hmm. I wonder. I mean, I ask everybody in the round. And it's a question I ask myself: is denying and morally condemning still the right concept? I mean, instantly we all, I think we of course we agree, and we are living in a generation of let's say quite experienced, but. And we instantly would condemn anti-Semitic voice by nature, basically. But I'm not quite sure if that concept still works with a generation who is very different or lives very different in a different area, in a different time, who does not have this kind of memories and not this kind of, let's say, also experience. So my question to everybody is wouldn't it be more efficient also in a way to use or to address and challenge attitudes openly, maybe? And to clarify a little bit my thinking is that I was quite shocked, not shocked in a sense of negative feelings, but quite or impressed how fast Me Too had an impact in respect, if you look at how long it took for pro-feministic political correctness to succeed. So is that this kind of, let's say, shocking and this kind of also provoking a more efficient way to deal with the phenomena? I
think, could I say a word?
Yes, sure. Father,
yes.
Please.
because I think exactly that this teaching way to show we are moral superior than this conspiracy people, I think that's totally the contra effect, because often the people feel as victims, feel as underdogs against the system, and then if the system teach them that's the right fact, they feel really, that's the point, because I'm touching a sensitive point, so the system explain me how it is right. And of course, there's another thing. If you want to provoke, if you want to be heard, if you want to have a wave as a person, maybe totally, in the shadow, then if you do hate speech, you earn reactions, you earn provocative things. And I think this is also like a kick, like a little bit an adrenaline push. And I think that's totally counterfact. I think what works, it's not to respond to this person, you are bad, you are moral inferior, what you're saying, this is a taboo, because I think that's not the way, but to debunk the facts, to say, okay, you're a little bit silly, you're a little bit, that's not right what you're saying. So for example, on TikTok, it's a very new media. There are, videos very crisp, very short from hate speech. And there are people who watching this video and commenting directly. For example, one is saying that and the other say, no, it's like that. Or question, really, that's it? And the result is the hate speecher looks silly. He looks as an idiot. And because I think that's the point, that often this hate speech preachers looks very cool, looks very, young, cool, fresh, short, on the point. And I think with the same language, if you debunk them, this for me has more effect than with a lot of money to make very professional videos to show that are the real facts, because I think it's a contra result.
If I could jump in for a moment.
Please, Rabbi Lipman, please.
I think there are 2 points that I want to make. One is it's hard to, from my perspective, to debunk someone who is willing to believe that the Jews are out to control the world and we're in control of all the money. It's hard to engage in that conversation from my perspective. However, people don't want to be in the camp of hating others or racism or discrimination. Most people will say racism is wrong. That's why, for example, when the Black Lives Matter movement really took off in the United States in the last few months, and then we saw some of the leaders that were involved and some of the spokespeople that had some anti-Semitic statements that were made, it was critical to point out, and there were a lot of celebrities who helped with this, especially in the sports world, that you can't fight against racism and also support anti-Semitism. To show that hatred against a group of people is a hatred against a group of people, and discrimination is discrimination, and you have to show the parallel between the two, because most people do not want to be in the camp of I'm discriminatory or I'm racist. And if you show that anti-Semitism is a form of racism, that goes a long way. That's point one. Point number two, though, which is on a certain level the elephant in the room, and that is we cannot remove the issue of Israel from the equation. I know that's not our topic for the panel. I don't want to get sidetracked by it, but we do have to realize that there's a world that we live in where, of course, people can criticize Israel just like anyone can criticize any country. But there's a line that's often crossed where it's just outright anti-Israel bias, where it's not legitimate, reasonable criticism, and it's masked as being anti-Israel, but it actually is an anti-Semitism. I've been in discussions all around the world, and it took me a while to come to that conclusion. But in the world today, being anti-Israel might be politically correct, but being anti-Semitic is not. And we're seeing a growing movement of anti-Israel where the real sentiment behind it is anti-Semitism. And that has to be exposed as well, because you can tell people criticize any country you want. Of course, that's legitimate. You can disagree with the policies, but whether you're right wing or left wing, the Jewish people have a right to a state. They have a right to some element of this land, and the movement to totally delegitimize that and to remove them from this land, that has to be exposed for the anti-Semitism that it is.
I think
Roger, please.
The problem is more general, and it's more difficult. Markus, you have been editor-in-chief of a very serious newspaper, and you realize you don't reach younger readers anymore, and public broadcasters don't reach public young readers or viewers. So you don't reach them with the information. They are not interested. They are more interested in trash content. They get a lot of that in the internet, and of course that's why if we'd like to inform them, or we'd like to educate them, it's very, very difficult. They're just not interested to get the basic information about history, sociology, etc. And everybody in the media world is doesn't have an answer. How do we reach young people with serious content? And there is no answer around. And that's, of course, opens the door for people who spread conspiracy theories, because people are not educated. They fall for these very strange stories and think it's interesting to find the truth behind the truth. And we do some personal research like QAnon. They trick these people into feeling that they have learned something by themselves, because they don't have basic information about what happened in the last 100 or 200 years in the world.
You mentioned now again that the younger generation is not reachable by, let's say, this kind of classical information or this kind of also education. But Alana, when I listened to you, I had got the feeling that you are quite optimistic that there are ways and means to address this topic also in a language or in a form which is understandable for a generation who is not who lives in different times for obvious reasons. So my question would be again to everybody of the panel: is it really a problem of the youth, so to say, anti-Semitism, or is it just a problem of, let's say, mankind, but the youth is maybe more confronted with it because they use more this kind of media, which helps to promote anti-Semitism in a very radical, in a very easy, in a very anonymous, in a very globally way. Because my thought is, it's not the youth who is electing President Trump, for example, although he is treating every day a lot of really nonsense and so to say also things which are not correct, not in any sense correct.
But the young people don't vote for him in large numbers because they are ashamed of him. Because that's not presidential. That has nothing to do with anti-Semitism or not. Even if he's racist and all these things come together, he's a liar, he's a misogynist and all these things, they're ashamed of him. Anti-Semitism plays a role, but that's not at the center of the discussion.
There's no doubt, though, that you were talking before about how to reach the younger people. There's so many creative ways. I mean, Roger was saying how in the traditional ways you won't get to them. I know that certainly in our organization, HonestReporting, we have younger people who understand how the videos work, how to reach people, different mechanisms of getting people information, even if it's not in a traditional, here, I'm going to sit down now and lecture you about it. We're reaching over 20 million viewers over the course of this year in the age of 18 to 34 in very specific areas. That's the way you have to do it. There are many organizations that are out there doing so. My dream is that all can work together, Can you imagine if everyone with all of their audiences got together, and not just Jewish organizations, but organizations throughout the world, Christian organizations and others that all support this effort. If we work together with our resources and got messages out in the, the 30-second video and then 1-minute videos and just hammered home the same way, we could be very effective, but we're not doing it in a strategic manner at the moment.
But Rabbi Lipman, to come back to what you said a couple minutes ago, or did I got it incorrectly? You also advocate, let's say, more tough stance against platforms distributing this kind of content.
Absolutely. On the one hand, a strong, unified battle, a legal battle against these platforms to make sure that they are removing the content, they have a clear definition of anti-Semitism, and they follow it, and they're monitoring it, and they're making sure that it's removed. We can't have a situation where, for example, where Twitter allows the leader of Iran to tweet about the annihilation and destruction of Israel, which is outright anti-Semitism, no matter how you spin it, and yet other people are not allowed to print other things. Today, a member of Knesset tried to tweet about a humanitarian issue with prisoners that are in captivity in Hamas, and that wasn't allowed. We have to fight against that on the one hand. On the other hand, a very proactive educational approach, but one that meets the needs of the 21st century, meets the attention span and the interests of the younger generation.
What about the First Amendment and free speech in America? You are entitled in the States, in Switzerland, in Europe, it's different, to every opinion. Of course, if you promote falsehoods, if you promote things or you write things that are obviously wrong, you now can be canceled by Twitter or by Facebook. But if it's an opinion which you don't like, in America, it's protected by the Constitution.
That's one of the things that we're fighting against. In America, it took some time because the companies are in America, like you said, in Silicon Valley and California, for even things that were, let's say, detrimental to youth, things that were dangerous to youth. It took some time to fight against that to make sure that was removed. Now it's viewed as if it's dangerous, if it's going to hurt someone, we'll remove it. So we have to show that hate speech, whether it's against Jews or any other group, is in that same category and can lead people to kill and hurt other people. That's the approach that we have to take on the legal effort. But you're 100% right. It's certainly a battle against the elements of free speech.
To Alana and Father Nikodemus, I'd like to raise the question, who is the right person or the right institution to do this kind of education, this kind of bringing more sensitivity to the topic? Is Rabbi Lipman, are you, Father Nikodemus, are you the right persons, or should it be, let's say, more, not a younger one, but a different style to reach out? What's your opinion about that? Alana, maybe you can answer first.
Sure. Well, I think that there are certainly challenges with reaching the youth because they do not use traditional media. But I think that the problems we're seeing are not necessarily to do with the youth. They are, as you said, a problem for humanity in general. They are just at the forefront of using the latest technology. So that is where we are dealing with the medium and how to work with it. I think it's very important to meet the young people where they are. So to go to the apps, to go to the platforms, and to be disseminating messages around tolerance and anti-discrimination, anti-Semitism there, so that you can really be speaking and engaging with them. And in doing that, I think you need to use a combination of both the traditional sources of education, so the teachers, the professors, the community leaders that would have traditionally been speaking to the public through traditional media, and then also be harnessing the world of influencers and social media trends and leaders and giants, jumping onto hashtags that have to do with viral dances, using everything that the young people are engaging with to put forward your message and to ensure that although we do want to have freedom of speech and we want to have that upheld in democracies around the world, there is also a freedom of, with the rights of freedom of speech come responsibilities. And so the freedom of dignity and equality also needs to be upheld. So there does need to be that clear line, not of censorship, but of regulation and monitoring between the two. And also just to go back to something you said earlier, Marcus, I think absolutely speaking out boldly and directly on these issues is the way to go, just as Me Too made so much headway by boldly calling out certain forms of discrimination against women. That needs to be done for hate speech and hate crimes across the board, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, the LGBTQIA plus community. That is really where we can see some traction.
Father Nikodemus, is the Catholic Church the right ambassador for this kind of
Okay, I think if we especially pointing out the phenomenon of anti-Semitism, I think the Christian anti-Judaism has played a big role that arise. So we have to be critic and no, I think a double answer. I think we have to do our own homework. That's for internal communication. And for example, Pope Francis is a very, very clear, you can't be a Catholic, or I would say you can't be Christian and anti-Semitic. It's contradictory, and we have that to point out and to teach that internal, and yes, and to make it very, very clear. Also, you can't be Christian and racist and so on, and that's clear that you are out of the community if you are a fan of that. And I think for our youth, it's very important, like vaccination. For the challenges they find in the net, in the new media, in the world, that they're really to teach what I said at the very beginning, to teach the taste of complexity, and that's good, and really and give them the facts. But this is internal. External, this is, I'm very, very critical if that works. For example, on YouTube, there are very, very excellent videos, but no clicks, because it's clear who is the channel. Catholic Church. Oh, it's clear. So why should one who's totally in that conspiracy theory watch a video from that channel? Of course not. So my experience, it's very good to go into the arena. So I'm also the best YouTube videos I have are not YouTube videos with church channels, but with other channels, and I'm the alien in that. But this was very successful because people say, okay, that's not now a church channel, but he as an alien, it's giving a Q&A, and I think that's the way. If you really want to fight against anti-Semitism, racism, you have not to build a very excellent channel who's clear, okay, it's a Jewish organization, it's a Catholic, or okay, the people don't go to that channel because it's clear they don't trust this channel. No, you have to go really to the arena of the influencers and to say, okay, let's make a Q&A.
Yeah, very good. Roger, last question to you, because you are the most experienced journalist and media entrepreneur on this panel. Rabbi Lipman and also Alana were advocating a little bit tough stance against platforms. Do you also see need for more media regulation?
Of course. I mean, Facebook, they have such a big power, and we have seen it in 2016 during the last election in the United States. Not everything has come out, but it was obvious that Putin and Russia subverted and tried to manipulate the election. And this is going to happen again. Everybody knows that. And of course, all these things have to be regulated. I mean, it's very difficult. We talked about first speech, First Amendment, free speech and First Amendment. But also in America, and especially in Europe, we have to find the boundary where we say this is not allowed. This shouldn't happen, and maybe should be prosecuted. And in Switzerland, you cannot libel people easily. We have those laws, and they should be enacted, especially in the internet, where there is a wild, wild west still happening, and where a lot of people are meeting, and we don't even know who they are, and there are certain communities totally out of the public arena, and we really should be more careful about it. Yes, I'm sure.
Okay, so thank you very much to everybody. Alana in Durban, Rabbi Lipman in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem. I'm not quite sure where you live, but...
Beit Shemesh, a suburb of Jerusalem.
Okay. Father Nikodemus in Jerusalem and Roger here in Zurich for this lively debate. I have to apologize. Ksenia Svetlova, who had to leave earlier this panel. Thank you very much. I think we got a lot of fruitful insights, a lot of, let's say, good advice, also some pessimism, but also some optimism. So I think that rounded it quite good up today, and I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you very much. Keep safe and healthy, and all the best to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wow, Markus, thank you so much. It was such an interesting panel, such an interesting discussion where we heard so many different perspectives on anti-Semitism and hate speech. And we hope that you enjoyed our first day of the summit.
Congratulations also from my side to the moderator, Markus Spillmann, and all the panelists. I have so many things to think about, but for today we are finishing. We hope that you join us tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to listen to the foreign ministers, and the Bertelsmann Stiftung will present their survey, Europe and Israel, Insights into Their Mutual Perceptions. So have a good night.
Yes, we have an interesting program.
Laila Tov.
Yes. And
so see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye.